It was supposed to be just another tense gathering for the cast, but what unfolded had everyone glued to their seats. Whispers spread quickly through the room as Bambi's expression turned from calm to a storm of anger. In her hand, a phone. Screen lit up, showing something so startling that even the most seasoned cast members froze in place. People leaned forward, straining to catch a glimpse, unsure if they were ready for what was coming. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife as she stepped toward Kirk, eyes locked, voice trembling not from fear, but from sheer rage. "You really thought nobody would find out?" she asked, and the silence that followed was deafening. Gasps echoed across the set, and Rasheeda's jaw tightened, her hands folding in her lap as if bracing for an emotional blow. These weren't just rumors floating in the air. These were images, messages, and moments that, if true, could change the way everyone looked at Kirk forever. Some tried to calm Bambi, others couldn't help but watch wide-eyed and stunned. The room wasn't just shocked, it was shaken to its core. And the screenshots hadn't even been fully revealed yet. Bambi stood in the center of the room, her voice steady but laced with fire. She wasn't yelling, yet every word she spoke carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken truths. Kirk shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his eyes darting between Bambi and Rasheeda, as if searching for some invisible escape route. The atmosphere was electric, every breath in the room synchronized, waiting for the next blow. Bambi's fingers tightened around her phone, the screen glowing faintly as though it was holding the most dangerous secret of the night. "You've been walking around here like you're innocent," she began, her tone dripping with disbelief. "But these messages, these tell a different story." She tilted the phone just enough for the people nearest to her to catch a glimpse. Their reactions were instant. One hand shot up to cover a mouth. Another person's eyes widened, so much they seemed on the verge of popping out. The whispers started again, low but impossible to ignore. Rasheeda sat rigid, her nails digging into the palm of her hand. She didn't move closer, didn't lean in to see the phone. She knew whatever was on that screen would be something she couldn't unsee. Yet curiosity was clawing at her. Battling with the quiet voice in her head telling her to stay seated, Kirk tried to clear his throat, a weak attempt to break the tension. "Bambi, I don't know what you think you saw, but don't you dare?" She cut him off sharply. The sudden edge in her voice made the room flinch. "Don't you stand here and act like this is nothing. I'm not talking about a random text or some misunderstood joke. I'm talking about patterns, receipts, evidence." Someone in the back murmured, "Oh my God," and another added, "This is bad." Bambi took a deep breath, almost as if reining herself in. She knew she could lay everything bare right now, but there was a part of her that wanted Kirk to squirm, to feel the fear of what might come next. The cast members closest to the scene exchanged glances, silently debating whether they should step in, but nobody moved. It was as though they all understood this was no ordinary argument. This was the kind of confrontation that rewrites relationships, that leaves marks no one can fully erase. Rasheeda finally spoke, her voice quiet but firm. "What is it, Bambi? If you've got something to say, say it. You don't need the suspense." Bambi's eyes softened just slightly as she looked at Rasheeda. "You deserve to know the truth," she said, almost under her breath. "But I need you to understand this isn't about hurting you. This is about stopping him from doing what he's been doing." Kirk let out a short, nervous laugh, though it felt more like a defense mechanism than genuine amusement. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, though no one seemed convinced. Then Bambi began reading aloud. "Not everything, just enough to send shockwaves through the room." The words she spoke painted a picture that couldn't be mistaken for anything innocent. There were references to late-night meets, coded phrases that carried implications too heavy to ignore, and a tone in the messages that was far from platonic. Rasheeda single quotes as hand trembled slightly as she reached for a bottle of water. twisting the cap slowly. She didn't drink. She just needed something to do with her hands, something to distract from the growing pit in her stomach. "When were these sent?" she asked finally, her voice steady despite the storm building inside her. "Recently," Bambi replied without hesitation. "Too recently for him to pretend like it's ancient history?" Someone shifted in their seat, the squeak of the chair echoing through the otherwise silent room. All eyes were back on Kirk, waiting to see if he'd fight back or crumble. Kirk looked around, his lips pressed together in a thin line. "You're making it sound worse than it is," he said finally. But the lack of conviction in his voice betrayed him. Bambi didn't reply right away. She studied him, letting the silence stretch until it was almost unbearable. "You had your chance to explain," she said finally. "Now, everyone here can see what you've been hiding." Rasheeda's breathing grew shallow, her mind racing with possibilities. She didn't want to believe any of it, but the way Kirk avoided her gaze was speaking louder than any denial he could offer. Someone whispered to their neighbor, "This changes everything," and it was impossible to disagree. The energy in the room had shifted completely. Alliances were questioned. Trust was fractured, and every person present knew that nothing would be the same after tonight. Bambi took a small step closer to Kirk, lowering her voice so it felt like each word was aimed directly at him, yet still loud enough for the room to hear. "I'm done watching you play this game. You want to keep secrets? Fine. But don't expect me to stay quiet while you do." Rasheeda's lips parted as though she wanted to say something, but no words came out. The images of what those messages implied were already burned into her mind, and she wasn't sure she was ready to hear anything more. The rest of the cast sat frozen, caught between the urge to comfort Rasheeda and the need to see how far this would go. Every second felt stretched, as though time itself had slowed down to make sure nobody missed a single detail of what was unfolding. And then, without warning, Bambi scrolled to another part of the conversation, one that seemed to push the tension in the room to an entirely new level. The expressions around her shifted from shock to outright disbelief. And even those who had tried to remain neutral couldn't hide their reactions anymore. RASHEED, single quotes S grip on her water bottle tightened until it looked like it might crack under the pressure, her eyes never leaving the phone in Bambi's hand. Kirk's shoulders slumped slightly, the weight of the moment pressing down harder than before, and for the first time that night, he seemed unsure of what to do next. Bambi's single quotes' finger hovered over the screen for a moment, as if deciding whether to reveal the next part. The glow from the phone lit up her face, casting sharp shadows that only added to the tension. The air felt heavier now, each breath drawn with caution, as though everyone feared that even the smallest sound could set off another eruption. She finally looked up, her gaze fixed on Rasheeda. "This is where it gets even harder to hear," she said quietly, but the softness in her tone did nothing to soften the blow that followed. She began reading again, this time slower, letting every word sink in. The messages described private moments, ones Kirk had shared with someone else. Moments that painted a picture too vivid to be misunderstood. Rasheeda's eyes flickered, her jaw tightening. She didn't interrupt. She didn't even move. It was as if her body had turned to stone while her mind replayed every moment of trust she had given Kirk. Kirk tried to lean forward, speaking over her. "Those are out of context. You're twisting this to make me look bad?" His voice cracked slightly, a small tremor revealing the fear beneath his frustration. Bambi's lips curled into a humorless smile. "You don't need my help to look bad right now." She turned the phone toward a few cast members sitting nearby. The moment their eyes landed on the screen, their faces told the story without a single word. One person whispered under their breath, "Wow, I can't believe this." The murmurs started again, louder this time. Everyone had questions, theories, and their own opinions. But the one thing they shared was disbelief. Raj, I finally broke her stillness. leaning back slightly as if trying to create space between herself and the truth hanging in the air. "How long has this been going on?" she asked, her voice steady but her eyes glistening. Bambi glanced at Kirk before answering. "Long enough for him to know exactly what he was doing. Long enough for it not to be a mistake." Kirk's hands moved, restlessly, fingers tapping on his knee, then adjusting his shirt, then rubbing the back of his neck. "This isn't fair," he said suddenly, his voice rising. "You don't know the whole story?" Bambi took a small step closer to him, her expression unshaken. "Then tell it," she challenged. "Because from where I'm standing, the only story is the one in these messages." No one spoke for several seconds. The tension had shifted from shock to anticipation, as if everyone was waiting for Kirk to make the move that could either save him or sink him completely. Rasheeda's hands lowered into her lap, fingers interlacing tightly. "I'm listening," she said, her voice low but cutting through the silence like a blade. "Say what you need to say." Kirk opened his mouth, but instead of an explanation, what came out was a sigh, long and heavy. He shook his head slowly. Bambi glanced back at Rasheeda, her expression softening for the first time. "I didn't want to do this in front of everyone, but you left me no choice," she said to Kirk, her voice carrying both frustration and finality. "She deserves better than this." The words landed with weight, and Rasheeda closed her eyes briefly, as though trying to absorb them without breaking apart. Across the room, few cast members exchanged knowing glances, people who had suspected something was off but had kept it to themselves. Seeing their unspoken doubts confirmed now only deepened the sense of betrayal hanging over the night. Kirk finally straightened in his seat, his expression shifting into something more defensive. "You think you're helping her, but you're just making things worse," he told Bambi. Bambi didn't flinch. "Worse than lying to her face. Worse than pretending you were building a future together while keeping someone else on the side." The quiet gasp from someone in the back broke the momentary pause. Rasheeda's eyes opened again, and this time they locked on Kirk's. "Is it true?" she asked, her voice stripped of all pretense. "All of it." He hesitated too long. That pause, heavier than any confession, told her what she needed to know. Her lips pressed into a thin line as she looked away, her gaze landing on the floor. The silence that followed wasn't just awkward, it was devastating. Bambi's phone buzzed in her hand, drawing her attention briefly. She glanced at the screen and then back up with an expression that made several people shift uncomfortably. "And just so you know," she said slowly, "this isn't even everything." The room fell into an uneasy stillness, the kind where every sound felt louder than it should. Outside, the faint noise of traffic seemed almost intrusive, breaking into the intense bubble that had formed inside. Kirk's single quotes S voice, when it came again, was quieter. "You don't understand what was happening. Then make me understand." Bambi replied without missing a beat. But Kirk didn't answer. His gaze drifted toward the wall, shoulders slumping once again as the unspoken truth hung heavy in the air. RASHEED, a single quotes S breathing was steady, but her mind was anything but calm. Each piece of this confrontation was stacking into a narrative she didn't want to believe, yet couldn't deny. The walls of trust she had built over years were crumbling right there in front of everyone, and there was no way to stop it. The quiet in the room felt almost unnatural now, as if everyone was holding their breath, waiting for something to crack. Rasheeda's hands rested still in her lap, but her eyes carried a weight that was impossible to ignore. She finally looked at Kirk again, searching his face for even a flicker of truth. But finding only the same guarded expression, Bambi shifted, her weight from one foot to the other, glancing at the cast members who were whispering among themselves. The whispers weren't subtle anymore. They were louder, sharper, carrying words like unbelievable, caught, and messy to every corner of the space. One voice from the back cut through. "I mean, if he was innocent, he'd be fighting harder. The remark hung in the air like smoke. Kirk's jaw tightened, but he didn't turn toward the speaker. Instead, he leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. "You think this is easy for me?" His tone was low, but there was an edge to it. "You think I don't care what she's feeling right now?" Rasheeda tilted her head slightly, her eyes narrowing. "You've had plenty of time to care," she said, her voice calm but weighted. "And plenty of time to tell me the truth before it got here." The room seemed to tilt with her words. A few people nodded silently, as if she had voiced the exact thought running through their minds. Bambi looked from one to the other, clearly caught between her frustration with Kirk and her concern for Rasheeda. "I didn't want this to blow up like this," she said, almost to herself. "But every time I see you pretending, acting like everything's fine, it makes my skin crawl." Kirk finally raised his head, looking directly at her. "And you decided you'd just take it upon yourself to destroy us." "Destroy you." Bambi's laugh was short and humorless. "You did that yourself. I'm just showing what's already there." A heavy silence fell again, broken only by the occasional shuffle of feet or someone clearing their throat. Rasheeda leaned back in her chair, her eyes distant for a moment. She seemed to be replaying countless conversations, dinners, and late-night talks, looking for signs she might have missed. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she asked, "Was there ever a time you were fully honest with me?" Kirk opened his mouth, closed it, and then let out a breath that seemed to deflate him. "Yes," he said softly. But it was unclear whether he was convincing her or himself. From the far side of the room, a cast member stood up, pacing slowly. "This is the problem," they said, addressing no one in particular. "People keep quiet about things, thinking it's better, till it blows up and gets ugly like this." Bambi's phone buzzed again, and she glanced at it with a frown. "More people are sending me stuff," she announced. "Apparently, I'm not the only one who's been keeping receipts." Kirk's head snapped toward her. "What are you talking about now?" She hesitated, clearly weighing whether to reveal more. "Someone just sent me a photo," she said, finally. "And if it's real, it's going to answer every question you've been dodging tonight." Rasheeda's gaze shifted between them, her breath catching slightly. "Show me," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her fingers. Bambi slowly held out the phone. But before Rasheeda could take it, Kirk stood up, stepping between them. "You don't need to see that," he said quickly. The sudden movement made several people shift uncomfortably. The tension was no longer just emotionally, had a physical edge now. The kind that made people brace for something unpredictable. Rasheed stood too, her voice cold. "Move." Kirk didn't. His stance was firm, but the unease in his eyes betrayed him. "It's not what it looks like," he said, but the words fell flat, sounding too rehearsed to be believed. Bambi took a step to the side, easily bypassing him, and placed the phone directly into Rasheeda's hands. The room went silent, as if even the air didn't dare to move. Rasheeda's eyes scanned the screen, her expression shifting from confusion to disbelief, and then to something harder, something final. She lowered the phone slowly, the image still burning in her mind. She looked at Kirk one last time. "You don't get to tell me what I need to see?" That sentence cut sharper than any argument. Kirk's lips parted, but no sound came. Eyes darted toward the door, as if considering whether to walk out or stay and face the wreckage. The people around them exchanged glances, some shaking their heads, others whispering in disbelief. No one dared to step in. This was no longer just an argument, it was the unraveling of something years in the making. Rasheeda placed the phone on the table, her hands steady now. "I'm done listening to excuses," she said quietly, and though her tone was calm, it carried a finality that left Kirk visibly shaken. He opened his mouth to speak again, but his voice cracked before the first word could form. He looked away. Instead, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. The room was thick with the sound of silence. The kind that only comes after the truth has been laid bare and there's nothing left to hide behind. The atmosphere felt heavier now, almost as if the air itself was pressing down on everyone in the room. Rasheeda remained standing, her eyes fixed on Kirk in a way that made it impossible for him to hide. Every second of silence felt like another nail sealing the fate of whatever was left between them. Bambi crossed her arms, watching Kirk closely. "You still haven't said it," she remarked, her voice steady but loaded. "You still haven't owned up to what's right in front of you." Kirk rubbed the back of his neck, glancing at the phone on the table without touching it. "I told you, it's not what you think. Stop saying that," Rasheeda cut in, her tone sharp but not raised. "Every time you've said those words, it's been a lie." The quiet murmurs around them grew into a low hum. Someone whispered, "He's done for," and a few heads nodded in agreement. Bambi took a small step forward, her voice rising just enough to cut through the noise. "You know what's wild? The more you try to dodge this, the guiltier you look. And the more I think about the times you've done this before." Kirk's eyes flashed toward her, his patience clearly thinning. "And you think you're perfect? You think you've never done deflect?" Bambi interrupted, her words sharp as glass. "This isn't about me. This is about you and the mess you've been hiding," while smiling in Rasheeda's face. Rasheeda didn't flinch, but her breathing was slower, deeper, like she was trying to hold herself together in real time. "If there's more," she said quietly, "say it now, 'cause I swear, if I find out anything else later..." She let the sentence hang unfinished, but the warning was unmistakable. Kirk shifted his weight from one foot to the other. "There's nothing else," he said finally, but even he didn't sound convinced. Bambi let out a humorless laugh. "Funny, because while you were stalling, I got another message." She pulled her phone out again, the glow of the screen lighting her face. "And guess what? It's from someone who claims they've been in contact with you for months." The collective reaction was instant gasps, widened eyes. People leaning in as if they could catch a glimpse of the screen from where they stood. "Let me see," Rasheeda said, her voice calm but urgent. Bambi didn't hesitate this time. She walked straight to Rasheeda, handed over the phone. "Dot eyes." I scanned the messages, her lips parting slightly as she read. The more she scrolled, the tighter her grip on the phone became. When she finally looked up, her expression was unreadable, but the fire in her eyes said enough. "Months, Kirk," she said softly, shaking her head. "While you were sitting next to me, while we were talking about our future, you were doing this." Kirk took a step forward. "Rasheeda, please don't," she said, her hand going up to stop him. "Don't come closer. Don't touch me. Don't say my name like you didn't choose every single one of these actions." Bambi glanced toward the rest of the cast, many of whom were now openly reacting, hands covering mouths, heads shaking, eyes wide. One of them spoke up. "This is going to change everything. The fans, they're going to lose it." Kirk turned to them, his voice rising in frustration. "You don't know the full story. None of you do." Bambi shot back instantly. "Oh, I think we know enough. And so does she." She gestured toward Rasheeda, who was still holding the phone, staring at it like she was memorizing every word. The tension reached a point where it felt like something had to break. Rasheeda finally set the phone down on the table again, her hands no longer trembling. She looked at Kirk for a long moment and then simply said, "I don't know who you are anymore." The sentence seemed to hit him harder than any shout or accusation could have. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. His shoulders slumped slightly, as if the fight had drained out of him. Bambi didn't take her eyes off him. "Maybe now you understand why some things can't be hidden forever." Room fell silent again, but this time, the quiet was filled with a different kind of energy, one that felt final. It was the kind of stillness that comes when the truth is no longer up for debate. And everyone knows that damage can't be undone. And that's where the room was left thick with tension. heavy with unspoken words and filled with the kind of silence that lingers long after everyone has gone their separate ways. The drama between Bambi, Kirk, and Rasheeda has sparked more questions than answers, leaving fans wondering what will happen next and whether any trust can ever be rebuilt after something this explosive. You've seen the screenshots, you've heard the confrontations, and you've witnessed the raw emotions play out right in front of the entire cast. But the biggest question remains, what's the truth behind these claims? And how will it reshape the relationships we've watched for years? Will Kirk come forward with more revelations? Or has the final word already been spoken by his silence? Fans are already flooding social media with their reactions, dissecting every line, every look, and every pause from that tense exchange. Some believe Kirk has more to confess, while others think the damage is beyond repair no matter what comes next. So now it's your turn. What do you think really went down? Drop your thoughts in the comments because we want to hear every theory, every piece of speculation, and every gut feeling you've got. If you were in Rasheeda's shoes, how would you handle it? And do you think Bambi went too far, or was she just delivering the truth that needed to be heard? Make sure you hit that like button if you want to keep up with every twist and turn in this unfolding storm. Subscribe so you never miss the next big revelation. And ring that bell so you're the first to know when the next wave of drama hits. This story is far from over, and trust me or